final day of racing here on leg one of the Ocean Race Europe, and all the teams have had a chance to enjoy the big breeze and the big speeds that come with those power reaches. But in those closing stages towards the finish, we know that the breeze is going to be nice and light. So Sailing Poland was certainly enjoying themselves, but let's take a look at where we left the fleet yesterday. And if you were with us, you'll know that it's been linked out and 11th Hour Racing trading first place for the last few days. The two Amoca 60s have been outperforming everybody else, really enjoying getting those strong speeds. But where we left the show yesterday, they were just hitting that light wind ridge and faced with the problem of needing to decide whether to jibe south or stay slightly north, but pretty much go nowhere. Linked out were the first ones to jibe south, with the Americans following shortly after. And while both of their boat speeds started to suffer, just look at the pack chasing behind. We knew that we were going to see a big compression in the fleet, and this was good news if you were at the back, not least for the Austrian Ocean Race Project, who spent much of this race behind. Linked out saw the rest of the fleet closing in, and suddenly they had an awful lot of company.
Non mais c'est joli là, joli spectacle au milieu des bords là, on est pas mal. C'est du beau monde.
Avec The Novel dessous.
So linked out suddenly with an awful lot of company, and you can see from as the fleet got close enough to the shore, we managed to get them in range of the helicopter, just how patchy the breeze was. The clouds very low to the surface of the water kept the breeze in some areas, no wind in others, and it's been incredibly tricky for the fleet to try and link all those positions up. So tricky indeed that actually we did have two of the boats bumping together. At a little bit more on that later. But in the meanwhile, let's take a look at how the fleet have positioned themselves. Basically, we ended up with two groups, north and a south, either side of the exclusion zone, where Murpuri and Buavali both to the north. Now, both of these boats were hoping that the wind would be strongest inshore, or at least at a favourable angle, but it did mean that they were starting to go downwind towards the other group. Making some decent speed, certainly when you were keeping your eye on the tracker, but sailing over the northern side of the exclusion zone meant sailing a little bit more distance. As we were getting a little bit closer, you can see how much the breeze was lacking just off the shore. The clouds doing their work, and surely the geography kicking in as well, meant that it was really important to keep your eyes open. On Murpuri, that meant somebody up the rig, looking out to try and find the patches of wind. As they started making their way down south, putting in those jibes that I think in truth they were hoping they weren't going to have to make, they started to get a little bit of a feel as to how that southern group were faring. And it wasn't great news. Many jibes to go. Bureau Valley and Murpuri start closing down, and then they start to see the inevitable, with the southern group on one reach sailing underneath them and closing the distance between themselves and Cascais. It looked like the race leader Murpuri were just going to have to watch everybody else sail ahead of them. Meanwhile, in that southern group, we saw it split into three groups. All the way to the south, we had the boat that, was the race leader, linked out, now struggling in light winds with Viva Mexico and Axonabel. Ambersail 2 and Offshore Team Germany also in that southern end. Then the group where the leaders looked like they were going to come from. 11th Hour Racing, Corum and the Austrian Ocean Race Project. And then to the north of them, the only ones that were a real threat. Childhood 1 and Sailing Poland, and when the breeze started to kick in around the headland, both these teams were really pushing in to the finish. Now, we said earlier that there'd been a little bit of a bump out on the racetrack. We thought we'd bring you this clip here of what happened. This is just when we got our helicopter in the air, and you can see 11th Hour Racing and 4 of the VO65s in front. Now, one of the things that was happening a lot in that low cloud system with the pockets of breeze was the boats were starting, stopping. And as they all bunched up and rolled over the top, taking the wind out of each other's spinnakers, the leaders slammed the brakes on, and they meant everybody crunched up behind. For 11th Hour Racing, unfortunately, they weren't able to find a gap through, and their foil clipped the stern of Ambersail 2, spinning the Amoca 60 round and then putting both hulls together. Wasn't a bad enough collision to cause any real damage. No one was injured and both boats continued to race, but it certainly wasn't what either boat wanted. You can just see that right-hand foil as it hits into the stern of Amber Sail 2 and how much that manages to twist the 60 round. As I say, both boats managed to get themselves going again and were able to continue pushing towards the finish. The drama between 11th Hour Racing and Amber Sail 2 was a good few hours before the finish. And this is how those final few miles played out. As we said, it was that middle group where we were pretty convinced that the leaders were going to come from. The Austrian Ocean Race Project, who spent so much of this leg at the back, leading with 11th Hour Racing and Coram just behind. A mixture of fleets with the VO65 and the Imokas both running out from the middle. With Coram just to windward, they could see Childhood 1. This was the boat to the north, along with Sailing Poland, that was going to be able to cause a real threat, sailing down with a favourable breeze and a better angle down the coast. 11th Hour Racing could feel the pressure from the Austrian Ocean Race Project and Sailing Poland also coming down from the north. So that northerly leading group and the middle group coming together just before the finish. 11th Hour Racing trying to stay ahead and keep their sails clear as Childhood 1 coming down the coast narrowed in. And these two boats were just meters away from being able to affect each other's breeze. Every bit of progress that the windward VO65 made was a real threat to 11th Hour Racing. They couldn't afford to park up. But the problem for Childhood 1 was what was happening behind. The Austrian Race Project then started to attack Childhood 1 and they were forced to come up to try and defend. Now with two boats on the breeze of the Americans, 11th Hour Racing started to suffer yet again. So with 11th Hour Racing being sandwiched between two boats to windward and Sailing Poland to leeward, trying to go underneath, we started to get another change in the lead, and it was Coram underneath them who were taking a much deeper line to try and find a way round into the lead without sailing into bad air. Amber Sail 2 were doing the same again, a really leeward course to the south of those leading boats, and they were coming in with some really impressive fresh breeze. But it was Coram that managed to pick their way through. They weren't slowed down by those windward boats, keeping their sails clear and managed to punch themselves out in the lead. And 11th Hour Racing started to slip further behind. Childhood 1 having a little bit of a trouble with their A4, and this continued all the way towards the finish, with the Austrian Ocean Race Project now sitting to windward of Childhood 1. And the Austrians, the boat without the A4, could watch Childhood 1, the boat that had the A4 and had sailed so well with it for the previous miles of the leg, now struggling to get it down. The lesser of two evils, let's leave it up, let's not turn down to slow and bring it down in a controlled manner, just get across the finish line. Coram sailed cleanly across the line, getting themselves away from the battles that were happening with the VO65 to take first place in the Imoca 60s. But the first place for the VO65s came right the way down to the wire, with Amber Sail 2 crossing the line to leeward and the Austrian Ocean Race team crossing and winning just to windward.
Yeah! Yeah!
Yeah! Nice, boys! Yeah! Excited?
Yes! Go inside and get burgers, right?
Yeah. Steak.
Ah, it's crazy that we won this super intense race. Did you see the finish? 4 boats in a row. And it came this close after 4 days in a wet and wild race. We are super happy.
Good job.
Behind them for third place, Childhood 1 crossed the finish line, still flying that spinnaker as a flag. And then second place in the Imoca 60s went to 11th Hour Racing, who just pipped out as those 65s took the breeze in the final miles. Third place in the Imoca 60s looked to be going the way of the Germans, but it was linked out with the foil as it kicked in that final moments of the reach, who managed to sail through the leeward space of the German team, and linked out took third place in the Imoca 60s. And you've got to spare a thought for Merpuri Ocean Racing Team. This was the boat that had led in the VO65 class for nearly all the leg, but his decision to go on the northern side of the exclusion zone didn't pay out, and this boat will have to wait for another chance to claim victory in the Ocean Race Europe. So that was how leg one concluded, with the Austrian Ocean Race team claiming first place in the VO65 class and Coram taking first place in the IMOCA 60s, and the whole thing coming down to the final 15, maybe 10, maybe 5 minutes. It's been an incredible first leg. We're looking forward to seeing what the teams are going to be doing to get themselves ready for leg two, because this battle is far from over. And we're going to leave you today with a few words from our leg winners.
C'est une course intense, mais en même temps, il y a eu beaucoup d'écart entre les bateaux et différences de vitesse entre les bateaux selon les allures. Et on savait que tout pouvait jouer ici, comme tout pourrait jouer à Alicante à la prochaine étape et à Gênes aussi sur la fin de course. Donc, en tout cas, on est très content de cette victoire et on s'est bagarré jusqu'au bout. Puis le final était vraiment magique pour nous.
Like we are the newbies, a young team, not that much experience. Of course, as sailors, but not with the ocean race. And we're just super happy. The last 30 miles were so intense, it was unbelievable.
Okay, down, get him down.
Kevin, off.
He's in me.
Kevin,
We just kept on fighting. Last night was super nice. It was fast, it was wet, it was a real experience on this boat. So we just enjoyed it, and this is the result.